Hello, and welcome to the Stat Nerd Draft Report. Today I have three guests with me to talk about the prospects that may be underrated. First, one of my partners on the 94 Feet Draft Guide, William Walker. Next up, Connor Harr, a contributor for Hoops Habit. He does awesome draft work there. Finally, Austin Cooper. He's a contributor at the 94 Feet Report. I'm probably going to have a piece coming out jointly with him soon. Hopefully that's going to be a great piece. It's great to have all of you on today. So, Will, let's go ahead and just start with you. Who is your first prospect that you think may be getting underrated by some or all of the draft world?
I believe Mitchell Robinson is being a little overlooked by people just because he was kind of out of sight, out of mind after being kind of absent from college basketball at Western Kentucky this year.
Yeah, I definitely think that's fair. I think you look at he's kind of a litmus test for do you think the risk of reaching for that really, really high ceiling prospect is worth the unknown median outcome that he kind of presents you with. What do you think about him, Connor?
I'm pretty. I think it's hard to tell where he stands really without seeing him in college. Obviously, like Will said. I liked his stuff from EYBL. I'm sorry. His block numbers were crazy. I don't have an exact number on it, but he was really good at protecting the rim.
5.6 for 36.
Okay, there you go. So, I mean, I'm very intrigued by him, and I'm buying into all his athletic traits, but I still want to see what he can do really on the floor against higher level competition.
And Austin, what do you think about Mitch?
I had him, I believe, like 12 on my last board, and just because, once you start getting to, Robert Williams and for some people Mo Bamba, you have to. There's enough there to be scared of that maybe you start looking at Mitchell Robinson and just the physical upside he has, and deciding maybe that's worth the gamble. I've kind of come down on him a little bit since then. Just from some of the interviews, I'm just not sure about his IQ, basketball IQ, and it's going to be huge for him. But I still think he's definitely someone you could consider taking in the lottery.
Yeah, and I think with so many sinners at the top of this draft, and then it kind of drops off for a little bit, kind of after that tier of Mitch, Robert Williams, John Porter, and with so few teams needing a center, it's just kind of hard to like definitely peg a definitive floor for him in the draft, because you could see him falling just because it's hard to trade a center in today's NBA. And while he obviously has a high upside that makes him intriguing, it's just teams are weary of taking on additional center once they've got the depth that they need possibly.
I believe that is kind of what's going to make him slip and create a great value pick for him. I have him ranked at 6 on my board, and that's above Ayton, and that's pretty controversial. Definitely above Bamba. He seems like a guy who, even though his basketball IQ is not extremely high, he seems to actually enjoy playing, which is something I don't really feel for Ayton or Bamba. We mentioned the blocks, 5.6 blocks for 36 minutes. He's got a 7'4" wingspan. He is borderline fast up and down the court. And he's also not just good at protecting the rim. He's pretty daggum good at getting out on the shooters as far as like closing out on perimeter shooters. He blocks a lot of jump shots. And his shot is actually coming around. He made 23 pointers in a high school senior. It looks pretty good. And some of these weird videos that'll come out this time of year, where you see these guys working out against nobody or guys my size, 6 foot, and never played. They look pretty good, but he can take about 2 or 3 strides from the 3-point line and get to the rim. I mean, he's got some pop to him.
Yeah, you talking about his defense. I think for centers in particular in today's NBA, it's so important with how often teams are switching just out of necessity on on-ball screens. Do you think that he's going to have success switching onto the perimeter for 10, 12 seconds on the play?
I believe that could be in his future. He's got enough mobility, a little bit of side-to-side mobility. He'll definitely be better than Ayton. He'll definitely be better than Bamba on that one. So, in my opinion.
I think you guys really hit the nail on the head with it, talking about how his athleticism sets him apart. I think that, Patrick, you made up a good point too, where if you're putting him in the class of big men with Jonte Porter and Robert Williams, he brings a little unique skill set compared to Williams and Porter, where Porter's more like finesse and fundamentally sound, and Williams is a good rim protector and he's a good athlete, but he's also 6'8". So I think that Mitchell having the ability to step out on the perimeter, all the videos that come out of him shooting and stuff, which always look enticing, but sometimes they don't tell you the whole story. But I think that really sets him apart too, is something that the teams are looking for more in the modern NBA game.
Very much so. I believe that it's almost a necessity if you have championship aspirations for your team, you need at least one center on your team that can perform that switching scheme. So, Connor, let's go ahead and move on to your first prospect. Go ahead and tell us all about him.
Okay, mine might be the most controversial of all. I got William McDowell-White. He is currently a point guard for Bonich. I hope I'm saying that right, but it's hard to pronounce these German names. But he's plays in German Pro A League, sort of like the minor league system to Bros Bomberg, which is in the Euro League. He's about 6'5" point guard. Passes the ball really well. I think personally, I feel that he's the best passer other than Trae Young in the draft as far as complete like lead guards. He does a really good job out of the pick and roll, passing out of the pick and roll, and very good in transition. He has that grab and go threat that you don't see from a lot of point guards, especially in this class. He averages about 5 rebounds a game this year. He actually has a rebound percentage that was higher than Lonzo Ball's at UCLA, which is always like a team relative stat, but it's still a nice thing to see. He has good instincts coming out on the defensive, like long defensive rebounds, following the ball. His shot isn't great. He's shooting 28% from the 3-point line right now, but I think he is very effective in catch and shoot situations, which is something that I look for in a backup point guard, where you're looking at a guy that you want to take care of the ball, which he does, has a extremely low turnover rate, and just get your other teammates involved and knock down open shots. His defense is a little bit concerning on ball, but off ball he averages 2 steals a game, and he does a really good job being aggressive in the passing lanes off ball, and that also leads to nice transition opportunities as well.
Yeah, I mean, you do make a great case. I think his passing is definitely above some of the other point guard prospects that are in his range or even above the expected range of McDowell-White. It's hard for me to see him in the second round right now just because I haven't seen enough of him. But I do, there's more video I can watch, so I need to watch more video of him. I didn't get the edge, that Australian edge I was kind of looking for. Maybe it's unfair of me to expect an edge just because he's Australian, but that's just what I've come to know from their players. And, it makes him really likable. And maybe he has that likability too. We'll see. Anyone else got anything on him? Austin, maybe?
I have not gotten around to watching him. I know Connor sent out some video clips of him or some links to some of his games. So, his stats, the assist to turnover ratio is pretty extraordinary. So I'm excited to check him out. What kind of athlete is he?
He's not a great athlete, but I think he's definitely a serviceable athlete at the NBA level. He does a good job, even though he's not lightning quick. Does a good job of changing speeds and getting to the rim that way. When he gets in the lane, he can be a little bit too unselfish at times, but he does do a good job being 6'5" and having a really good frame of finishing well through contact as well. I think too, just having a 6'5" point guard really just helps you out so much. Just being able to see over the defenses and be able to make reads that other players don't have the luxury of making when they're like 6 foot, 6'3".
The height is definitely a differentiator and allows him to play with a potential other playmaker. And as long as his catch and shoot numbers translate, you said that he looks like he possibly could be a threat there. If that can translate, he put him with another playmaker, and I think lineups with 2 playmakers are honestly the way the league's going. If you don't have 2 playmakers, defenses are going to start overwhelming that one playmaker.
Yeah, and just from a practical point of view, it's guys like this that you always see going in that 50 to 60 range, where a team doesn't necessarily want to add another body to the roster, and you can leave him in Europe for a couple of years and then see how he develops, but you keep his rights. So sometimes these players are actually more valuable than some of these college guys because they're more willing to stay over there. They've already established themselves in Europe and can just kind of hang out for a couple of years while they develop instead of having these delusions of grandeur like some of these college guys do.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Will. I think him and another prospect, we're not going to get to him today, but Svi Mikhailiuk, I hope I didn't too badly do his name there, but I think he's another prospect we could see at the end of the second round because, some of these teams have just not enough roster spots to even consider bringing these guys over yet. So that's a good point.
Got 2 picks at the end of the second round. I mean, there's only so many young guys they can have.
Yeah, I think one of the other things too is I'm not gonna pretend like I'm like a crazy reporter or insider or anything, but I do know that he does have several interests from teams. I want to say there was at least 5 scouts at his probably 2 games ago. So he does have some real interest.
Interesting. Okay. I think we're ready to move on to Austin's first prospect. Why don't you throw his name in the ring?
All right. He's a little bit more well known probably than McDowell-White, I guess. But Elie Okobo. I had him all the way up at I think 11 last board I made, mostly just to kind of see how I felt with him there and kind of get some more feedback as to what things people were seeing in his game that were a potential issue. But I mean, he's not a top tier athlete. He's a little older. I think he is 20.7, whatever. He's a little older, but he's a really good off the dribble 3-point shooter, and that's just such a valuable skill that with the improvements I've seen him make from just this summer, where he was just an absolutely atrocious finisher. I mean, he had no touch. From what I've seen, he's improved dramatically in that regard. And I really buy his 3-level scoring potential. So between that and his improved assist to turnover ratio, which now sits 1.67, which is I think a fairly comfortable range for for largely a scoring guard. I think that's a pretty valuable potential point guard, and I have him as the second best in this class.
Okay, yeah, I have him in the 40s, I believe, right now, somewhere in there. That range is always changing as you were saying. Sometimes you move players up a little bit, down a little bit, see how you feel about them. I have him in that range, but I wouldn't be opposed to moving him up. I have a couple point guards over him, like Brunson and Sexton, but after that, I think he's right in that range with a couple other point guards we're going to be talking about today. Will, what do you think about Okobo?
I'm a big fan. I love the way he shoots. The length in his wingspan gives him the ability, if he concentrates, to play off ball in some lineups. You're talking about getting 2 ball handlers on the floor. If he can hold up as a 2 guard on defense, then he has that ability to play either guard position eventually. And I'm rising on him. I've got him at 34 on my board right now, and he's got enough athleticism and that sweet spot up shot. There's going to be a spot in the league for someone like that, most likely.
Connor, you have anything to add about him?
I have Okobo 31 on my board, pretty much for just having the same traits that Austin talked about. He's a dynamic scorer, especially off the dribble and in pick and roll. He's extremely effective. I'm not quite sure how well he holds up defensively, which is probably my only gripe of having him in the 30s. I probably could move him up with more tape watched. I've probably only watched 3 or 4 games, so it's relatively small sample size, but I hope to get back around to him soon.
Yeah, I think the defense is probably the biggest hang-up for him and quite a few other point guards, particularly in this class. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add about Okobo?
I was just going to add, in regards to the defense, he definitely, that maybe would be my main gripe with him, is that his concentration, his focus. There's plenty of times when you're watching him, he's just kind of sauntering around, almost like he's not interested in playing defense, off ball at least. On ball, I mean, he's got a good enough size, wingspan, and he's quick enough that he can be at least, a presence on ball. I mean, he's not Trae Young at least. That's a pretty low bar, but I probably would have him closer to, the 20 range right now. But I do think it is important probably to factor in just how much he's improved in this 1 year. I do think that that's a pretty promising indicator going forward. And as Will talked about with McDowell-White, if there's a chance you could draft him later, stash him, let him see how he develops, and potentially cash in on his value later.
Yeah, that's always a good option. Will, let's go ahead and move on to your second player. Go ahead and let us know who that is.
All right, it's one of my favorites, and I'm probably higher on him than most anybody, I guess, in the draft world. Isaac Bonga from Germany, the youngster who stands almost 6'9" and has an almost 7-foot wingspan. He plays like a primary ball handler type role on his team. The shot's not there yet. He shot 30% from three, and he takes a little while to get it off, but he shot about 90% from the free throw line. So as far as indicators go, it being that young, you get more strength. It just is going to come, I believe. And the fact that he's got such ridiculous arms, he gets to, wrap around passes. He sees the passing angles. He can kick out. He doesn't hold the ball. You get the ball to him, he's going to make the pass to the right guy. Like I said, being young, he's barely 18 and a half years old. He's still really skinny, not real strong, which kind of hurts him some on defense. But then again, with that length and the quickness that he's developing, you don't want to compare anybody to Giannis Antetokounmpo. I mean, it's crazy to even do that. But there's some of that archetype in there. The guy that doesn't look quite that athletic yet because their body is still developing. I mean, you can't forget that these kids are just, when you were 18 and a half years old, you don't have that man strength yet. You don't have your overall extreme quickness that you might develop a little bit later. You might have developed a little more bounce. Heck, he may not even be done growing completely. So that, with the ability, the fact that he seems to really enjoy basketball, which I think is an underrated part of kind of evaluating these prospects, because if you're going to expect someone to come in and work it as a full-time job and it's not their passion, you're not going to get what you kind of expect, just like in any other walk of life. So the fact that he seems to really enjoy playing basketball, and I just think he's got more room to grow than almost any prospect in this draft. So I've got him at 15. I know that's kind of crazy high, but hey, it is what it is.
The first thing that stood out to me about Bonga was his lack of strength. He could get to where he wanted on the court almost, but then when he got there, he didn't have the strength to, align his body to finish. Like he had the quickness, like you were saying, to get to the rim, and he just didn't have the strength to stabilize and move the defense enough to get the space he needed. And I think that and the jump shot are the two things holding him back from being like a surefire prospect on my board.
Yeah, and that's the youth. I really believe this is the youth coming out there, and that once he develops his body a little more and grows into his frame. I mean, he's still in that awkward developmental stage. It's almost like a teenager. I mean, you're 18 and a half years old again. Yeah, I'm a big Bonga fan, and again, with the draft and stash thing, you're talking about a guy who. Teams that don't have the roster room, you draft him, let him sit in Europe for a couple of years, and you have no idea what sort of assets you have to either bring over or use in a trade.
Yeah, he could definitely be a very intriguing prospect just in a trade down the road if he starts just tearing it up in Europe. Austin, what do you think about Bonga?
He's someone I've, mostly more recently been getting around to watching more of. And I mean, I think Will covered most of what I have to say about him. I do think he's one of those guys that has, enough unique kind of intriguing skills that makes you want to bet on him, just because a player being unique is such a good, special players, that separate themselves with how unique they are usually. I do think his body will probably fill out a little bit better. And that does seem to be mainly what's holding him back right now. So like with Okobo and McDowell-White, draft him. I'd probably take him close, more in the second round. but draft him later, let him develop, and he definitely could be a steal.
Connor, what do you think
Anyways,
about him?
I just got done doing some international scouting reports. Bonga was one of the players that I covered, and like Will brought up, I think really what gets me is that he's 6'8", 6'9", and just plays below the rim, and I think that hurts him more than just. And it's also combined with the strength. But if he adds that lower body strength and can get that burst up at the rim, I think that takes his scoring to a whole new level. Also, the other thing is despite the free throw percentage, I got major concerns about his jump shot because it's just like Will said, it's slow and it's also extremely robotic to me. Like there's not a lot of lift, there's not a lot of it doesn't look very fluid. It just looks like very robotic, I guess.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, and again, that's why I have those reservations about moving him up. It's like it could translate, but you definitely aren't confident about it, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, the robotic jump shot is the main concern. Um, again, it's a concern with a lot of these guys that are these weird, unique athlete type. I just think he's worth the gamble. When you get to a certain point in this draft, you're either taking a role player, or you're taking a potential superstar. As small of a percentage as it is that he actually gets there, you want to take more bites at the apple, so to speak, and kind of stock your pantry with these type of guys because you only get so many chances. You can't just play it safe all the time. I'm a big risk taker when it comes to drafting, by the way.
Yeah, I think when, like you said, like we've talked about with the draft and stash guys internationally, I think Bonga is really the most realistic to be stashed and be stashed for maybe 2 years or more. Like I really do believe in him, like you said, because he's so young, and that's why I have him at 34 on my board. But I do think that once you get to a point of where just the jump shot, like I said, it just concerns me a little too much for me to move him up, even more than just not being able to explode at the rim. Because other than that, I mean, he's solid. I mean, he's a great passer, great vision, real defensive versatility too. Especially when he played Team USA at the FIBA, he did an amazing job guarding a bunch of different guys from USA. One of the parts that really stood out to me was he was guarding, I think it was a Josh Okogie on one possession. He did a really good job guarding Okogie, slid his feet with him really well. And then right coming back on the next possession, he just muscled up with PJ Washington somehow and just got a charge call on him, which I thought was really awesome as well, just to be able to showcase that versatility, being able to guard multiple positions.
He definitely is very versatile. I think that's probably his biggest selling point. All right, so let's bring it back to the prospects in country. Connor, throw us the next prospect.
All right, so I got Bruce Brown from Miami, combo guard. I'm trying to find his realistic height because on ESPN, the Draft Express guys listed him at 6'3.5". Everywhere else I find he's 6'5", and I think that the 6'3" measurement was from him playing in high school. I could be wrong on that, but I believe that's where that's from. But I'd say he's probably like 6'4" ish. Still, that's not completely ideal size for a wing, but I think he does have the ability as a playmaker and as a ball handler to be a combo guard. I think one of the biggest problems with him was just how badly people feel he regressed this year. And I'd just like to point out that he did have a stress fracture, and a stress fracture is one of those injuries where you don't just go into practice one day and all of a sudden you have a stress fracture. Like it builds up over time. And I think in the beginning of the season, he showed off some great stuff. And I think he's really, I think people are just too hesitant or too quick to move him down on their board. And my other thing with him is I do believe in the jump shot. I think he has a high arcing jump shot. I think that he can be a respectable shooter, and I think if he's respectable enough that he'll be able to draw those closeouts, at least a decent close. Even he has a very quick first step that can help him get to the rim. He has a great body. I think that helps him, even though he doesn't always finish at the rim very well through contact. He always has great body control, and when he goes up, and I think that's something that can translate to him eventually finishing better through contact. And lastly, the thing I wanted to just point out is I feel like a lot of people undersell him as an athlete. I think he's extremely quick, and I think he's a pretty good leaper. I'm not going to say he's like crazy like Hamidou Diallo or something, but I think at the combine, he's definitely going to surprise some people with his athletic testing.
I'm not gonna lie, I was one of the first people out on Brown. I'm not a believer in the jump shot, but it's very possible that I'm wrong. If he has any semblance of a jump shot and he can force that closeout to where the defense actually has to respect him, then I'm definitely too low on him. But I don't have that confidence in him now. What do you think about him, Will?
I've dropped him a little bit. He's 37 on my board, but you have to remember sometimes with the way these things fluctuate. Sometimes your first impression or sometimes the first impression is the right one. And so at preseason, at the end of last season, people were projecting him to be sort of a fringe lottery pick, to go somewhere in the mid-teens. The jump shot is a little scary. The fact that you think he's a sophomore and he's going to be 22 almost by the time he's drafted, that's also he's a little bit later in his developmental curve than you would imagine. I do think he's a great athlete. He does have trouble finishing at the rim for some reason to be such an athlete. But I would take a chance on him in the second round for sure. One of these guys, like I said, sometimes the first impression, sometimes these injuries come up and people try to play through them and it just kills their draft stock. Like, you could look at Justin Jackson from Maryland as someone who possibly tanked his own draft stock by trying to play through an injury, possibly. So it may not be the wisest decision. But then again, when you look at someone that is competitive enough to get out on the floor when they're hurting and they're in pain, that's somebody you kind of want to – that's somebody you want to go in the locker room with. That's somebody that you don't mind having on your team. You're going to go to battle with them every night, So there is something to that too. If he can work on that jump shot and get a little better at finishing at the rim, sky's the limit. He is a very good athlete.
Austin, what are your opinions on Brown?
I think the key with him is just his versatility. I mean, besides the age that Will mentioned – and, the jump shot, which is obviously huge. And I have him somewhere around 30 because of the jump shot. And I'm not super sold on it. But, I mean, if it comes around, they would say he's a great athlete. He's, a pretty good ball handler. Whenever he ran pick and roll this year, his passing numbers were good. He's definitely a good decision maker for the most part. Great rebounder for his position, and he's just the strength and frame he has, despite his height, making him more of a combo guard, two guard. I think he's one of those guys that you wouldn't be shocked to see him, bodying up a small ball four or whatever at some point in the league. So if you can get him with Budenholzer's coaching, or Budenholzer's shooting staff, or the Spurs, any team where you can feel pretty confident that he's got a better chance than most of improving that jump shot, then I think he could return quite a lot of value.
That's a fair take. I think it's all about when he's taken as to how I personally feel about the value of the pick, obviously. Anyone else have anything to add about Brown?
Yeah, real quick, I just wanted to hit on his defense. I think he's really good laterally. I think he's probably one of the better man-to-man defenders in the class. Too, at Miami, I mean, he's going to struggle. You put him on a team where there's virtually no playmakers. I mean, he's out there and he's the only guy that really looks to pass the ball. And it's not to say that the other guys don't want to pass the ball. It's just that that's not really their strength. I think we can all agree that Miami was kind of hard to watch this year at times.
Absolutely.
But yeah, he's a guy that I'm just failing to see why people moved him down other than the shooting. But I mean, other than that, like Austin said about the rebounding too. He's tremendous rebounder. Average 7 a game this year, actually went up from last year. And I think that really speaks to his ability to grab and go too. And he's tremendous at that. He excels in transition. I mean, that's his best part of his game, is being able to make plays in transition. He knows where everybody fills the lanes at, and then he can also finish in transition one day once he starts to get his finishing down.
All right, so last two prospects, actually. We have a kind of a cheat here, but I'll allow it. Go ahead and give us the last two names, Austin.
All right, so we've got Carsen Edwards from Purdue and Shamorie Pons from St. John's. No guarantee either of them, decide to stick in this draft class, and next year's not looking super strong, especially in the point guard department. So, there's a decent chance they go back. But my main point with both of them is that I think Jalen Brunson probably separates himself from those two a little bit. His production is just on another level. But, especially compared to Colin Sexton, I really don't see much of a significant argument for him to be taken above, especially dramatically above Edwards or Pons. I think Edwards, clearly one of the better shooters in this draft. He shot over 40% from three on almost 13 attempts per 100. He shot 37% on 94 attempts from three off the dribble. He was proficient running the pick and roll, shooting off the dribble there. I mean, pretty much every way you look, he shot 50% from NBA threes, the NBA three-point line. So he's definitely a great shooter. And I don't think he's a great athlete, but I think he's a fluid athlete. He's got, good control. He's kind of like almost bow-legged, but there's something about the way he moves around the court, and he's got, and his stockiness he's a little bit more on him than Pons. So, I think he finished poorly at the rim. He wasn't a very high volume passer, even though his assist turnover ratio was decent. I just think he's someone that if you're looking at taking a point guard outside of the elite guys, which I probably wouldn't do until late in the first at the earliest, he's someone that could come in, be a valuable scoring player, scoring guard off the bench with some kind of potential to start possibly. And honestly, I don't see that being above. That's kind of where I have Sexton and Pons as well. Speaking more to Pons specifically, you look at his efficiency numbers in general, and they're pretty terrible this year. I mean, he just shot terribly, despite last year shooting something like 37%, I think, from three. This year, it went down quite a bit. He shot 25%. I think whenever he got catch and shoot opportunities, he looked a little bit better, but the shot is definitely a question mark for him. He shot over 85% from the line, and he shot over 80% last year. So, free throw numbers are positive. They give you some kind of hope for it. But I think the main thing with him is that he's fairly athletic. He was really productive with his steals. I think that speaks to some of his IQ, jumping passing lanes. And he was a much better finisher than I think a lot of people gave him credit for. For his true shooting percentage to be, 52%, which is bad, but considering the volume and inefficiency of his jump shooting, he had to compensate a lot with his finishing at the rim. And he managed to get there without a lot of help from his teammates. And, he was more efficient at the rim than Sexton, who I think is given this label as the John Wall light kind of slashing point guard. And I think Shamorie outperformed him there. And I'm not sure I have any more confidence in one's jump shot over the other. And Shamorie's a better passer. This is kind of turning into an anti-Colin Sexton argument. It's not really what I was hoping for, I guess. But I think I just feel like you can make a good case for Edwards and Pons to be in that discussion with Sexton, wherever that is.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there. I think Carsen Edwards is probably more likely to return, in my opinion, than Pons. And with Pons, for me, it's almost like walking up to a roulette table and just putting it all in on black. Like either the jump shot pans out or it doesn't. It's almost like a 50-50 shot to me with how good his shooting was his freshman year, and then how bad it was last year. It really could go either way. It's something that I kind of struggle with, how to balance the expectations there. Will, what do you think about Pons and Edwards too?
I kind of feel like they both should go back to school. Like you said, the strength of the draft kind of makes it seem like they would push them down a little further than they would want to. I don't see either one of them going in the first. I'm a little higher on Carsen Edwards than I am Pons, just because of the body style, the body size, and the shooting. It just seems it would translate a little better. I don't really have either one of them that high. Matter of fact, I have Pons at 54 and Carsen Edwards at 65. I may have to start flip-flopping that one there. So I'm not really sure. When it gets down past 45, it tends to be very fluid. You know, it kind of changes from week to week. You kind of get a better feel for these guys. And it seems to be sort of a deep draft this year and not next. Personally, I'd go back if I was Carsen Edwards for sure. I think he could potentially be a first-round pick next year.
Connor, what are your opinions on these two?
Yeah, like Will said, I think both should go back to school. And like Austin said as well, especially because of how weak the point guard class is going to be next year. I really don't think that you can even point out one incoming point guard that would be a one and done, which is what you normally see the bulk of the first round of the draft being nowadays. As far as Edwards goes, I think he's extremely efficient, and I think he's a really good scoring point guard. I don't have him ranked right now just because I tailor my boards to whether I think they will declare or not, and I'm pretty much out on Edwards declaring. But I do think that he'll be probably a top five point guard to start my preseason board. And with Pons, I have him 45 just because there's a chance, but I don't think the chance is that high that he's going to declare. My biggest thing with Pons, and one of the reasons why I'm not as high on him, is it's not as much of the shooting as it is his burst. I feel like when you're 6 foot, 6'1" like that, and you can, even though he's a great finisher, you have to be able to have that whole next level of speed just to be able to get into the lane and beat those defenders, or else those Embiid's going to swallow you whole.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see. I would agree that I think Edwards especially, and probably Pons as well. I think Edwards should come back just because, because it is a weaker class and it would help him, and he doesn't seem to have a lot of momentum right now. But Pons especially, just because he shot so poorly from three, I can't imagine considering where I do believe in his shot, I can't imagine he would shoot this badly next year. And I really think with some of the big performances he had this year that he could gain quite a bit of momentum coming back, shooting a much better percentage from three, something closer to last year's. It being without the top tier of guys, people being much more open-minded of who could be the best point guard prospect in the class.
Obviously this is early to ask this, but do you think he could be seen as that number one point guard prospect next year if his inside the arc he's the 2018 version, but then outside the arc he's the 2016, 2017 version of Pons?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a chance. Trey Jones is like probably the number one seemingly guy coming in next year. Depends on who else stays, I guess, but he's only he's only half a year older than Sexton right now. So even though he's in his second year, he's not a super old sophomore. So coming back next year, he's still going to be young enough that he's not just some complete, finished product. And, honestly, I'm not positive what the talent situation is at St. John's going into next year. I think Tarek Owens left, but other than that, I'm not positive what it is. But I do know he was kind of thrust into this, lead guard, do it all kind of role this year. And I thought he did fairly well in it. So giving him a whole another year to kind of acclimate there, he could improve his assist to turnover ratio a lot more and just take another jump as someone with a decent assist to turnover ratio and high steal rate has a little bit more propensity to do.
Absolutely. So anyone want to throw in any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Just talking about like what you said where you asked Austin if Hans could be the number one point guard in the class coming into next season. And if he does have a year like he did his freshman season, I think there's a very good chance he can be. I do have a top 30 right now for the 2019 draft class, and I have Carsen Edwards at 18 as my top point guard prospect. And I would have Pons higher if or when I hear that he is coming back to school. I
would just like to throw one more name out there as my honorable mention. And so, I I feel like we just kind of glossed over. Nobody's really heard of this guy too much, even though he was a highly rated recruit going into University of Illinois and then played for Oakland this year. Kendrick Nunn. I was kind of forced to watch film of him doing our research. I really think that this guy is going to be something. He is going to be a bench scorer in the NBA. He may not be taken in the second round, and it would be a mistake if he wasn't. He reminds me of a young Ben Gordon that actually is stronger physically and can play defense. So that's a pretty special guy. He's a little older. He's like 22, 23. But that's just a name just to throw out there for everybody to remember, when it comes time.
I think Connor knows all about Kendrick Nunn after his Twitter interactions. But yeah, all right. It was great having y'all on today. I'm gonna give y'all each a chance to go ahead and plug your Twitter so everyone knows where to follow your stuff, find all your awesome writing. We'll go ahead and start us off on that.
All right. I am proudly part of the draft team for the draft guide here at the 94 Feet Report. You follow me on Twitter at @WillAndyWalker or WillAndyWalker NBA, and I don't tweet as much as I should, but I try to stay in the conversation.
Austin?
My Twitter handle is pretty complicated. It's just at Austin C. Cooper. So yeah, I don't tweet a ton either, but I'm on there. I respond at least.
And hey, response is probably the best thing you can do. There's a lot of people who do not do that. I'm not going to name any names, but Connor, go ahead and give us your Twitter handle.
Yes, you can find my work at Hoops Habit, and you could also follow me on Twitter at Harr Connor. I do have a William McDowell-White piece coming up that should be out early next week, and I'm very excited about that. I think that's going to be my best one yet.
All right, yeah, it probably will be an awesome piece. All of your stuff is. You can find my stuff at Hoops Metrox. That's HOOPS Metrox. And like Will was saying, we have a draft guide out. You can find that at the 94 Feet Report. Awesome stuff. We right now we have the top 40 prospects. And if you listen to this after Monday or on Monday, hopefully, we'll have the top 50 prospects and the top 20 with videos, except for Mitchell Robinson. Like, subscribe, follow, share, do all of that awesome stuff, and have an awesome day.